bikes is, well, they're electric bikes, so you can go further. If you're older, you can use them. And the key thing, certainly speaking personally, is it's much easier going uphill. Because the advantage that Utrecht and places like Cambridge have, of course, is they're flat. So e-bikes are an absolute game changer. So I'm not saying, without in any way decrying public transport, which I'm all for, it's actually much cheaper to be turning streets into streets for all, carefully planting street trees, changing the use of carriageway and a grade to make something feel like a much safer place to walk and cycle and use e-bikes and scooters. And I think the opportunity there within existing urban places to transform how people move around, actually at a fraction of the budget of putting in a tram system or a train system or guaranteeing buses for the next 50 years is quite profound. So that for me is the golden apple at the end of the bough. I just made that analogy up. I don't think it works.
just to echo that, I mean, I think it's something that we see. I was speaking earlier about transitioning from diesel to electric or other clean vehicles. People actually like these things, you know. So whether it's e-bikes or electric cars, and talking about sort of bridging political divides or ideological divides, these are things which are genuinely popular. You know, people like an e-bike, and that is an example, I think, of, for example, tax incentives which are provided to companies now, which aren't actually that well known about how tax efficient it can be to provide, for example, e-bikes to your staff or electric car leasing schemes. I think that's the role of government, is to be doing things which really, in terms of cost, are pretty de minimis in the grand scheme of things, but really are popular policies in those sense.
Off the scale. I've never run a workshop where most people aren't nodding their heads and agreeing with wanting to do that.
Yeah, I was actually what I was trying to ask before was, you know, EVs are going to be part of the solution, but they still do produce particulate matter pollution. How do we convey to people sort of where EVs need to be, and also reassure them about people's concerns that actually some of the most harmful particulates are still being produced by EVs? Yeah,
I think, you know, part of it was, I think with the other panelists earlier, some of this has to be behavioural changes, doesn't it? That's obviously a more difficult conversation to have with people. If you say, well, just swap your diesel car for an electric car, and then, you know, it's all going to be fine. I mean, I think part of it has to be bringing people along in terms of behavioural changes, but there's going to be no perfect outcome, is there? I mean, that's the idea that we're going to have entirely and utterly clean air, completely devoid of any pollutants of any kind whatsoever. It is just something which isn't going to happen. I think, you know, all we can do is really be making incremental and better change. And, you know, are EVs better than diesel? Yeah, sure they are. You know, there are going to be concerns, and I think we have to also be challenging the other sort of story from the diesel side, is challenging sometimes the scientific consensus as well. You know, there was a broad consensus that that's the right thing to do and move, without sometimes listening to some of the dissenting voices. And I think that's quite important. It's, you know, important of a forum like this is to be discussing some of those issues openly.
If I could wave a magic wand, and this might annoy some people in the audience, so I apologise. I recognise this is the practical politics about to happen, but I'd take the big cities like London. Now, there's quite decent modelling research on this. It's not quite that I'd ban private cars or EVs within them, but I'd switch the primary private mode for larger places away from electric cars, it's essentially electric rickshaws with a 15-mile maximum speed limit. And most of the modelling shows that most journeys you'd get there faster, as well as creating far less pollution, because you wouldn't have to do all the stop-start. And so a car is over-scoped as something to move around within an urban realm. It's great for the country, and they'll stay around the country, and they should do, and I will use a car in the country. But within a town, actually, we've got the wrong form. And we made a category error 100 years ago when cars were invented and it was lovely driving around rural roads in the 1930s.
Yeah, I think there's a fact, I think my brother told me years ago, about how actually in some parts of London you are driving at the same speed than you did when you're in the horse and cart.
Oh, the average speed around London has not changed for 300 years. It's, you know, it's about sort of 7, 8, 9 miles per hour. It does not change. We just make more pollution. And we create diesel fume as opposed to horse poo.
Keen to move away just from talking about London now. So I know that...